I'm just reading an article on Newsbeat. Kathleen Zellner's latest statement. Uh, yeah, it's on Newsbeat. I won't read it out. It's just yeah, it's on Newsbeat. Saying the lawyer representing making a murder Stephen Avery says she has new suspects. So yeah, it's on Newsbeat. I won't read it all. I'm sure you've read it, and if not, you could read the article. Uh, and she's basically saying that uh, Kathleen Zellner is currently, well, not person saying this, but Kathleen Zellner is currently representing 53-year-old Avery in an attempt to overturn the conviction. In a new interview, the lawyer said the new suspects all knew Teresa. Uh, she told Newsweek, "We have a couple and there's one leading the pack by a lot, but I don't want to scare him off. I don't want to run him off. The bar for reopening the Avery case is high," she says, as Avery has exhausted all his appeals. And it's that Stephen Avery has exhausted all his appeals that I find hard to understand. Because the people in charge of the appeals are the very people who sent Stephen to prison in the first place. You know, in 1995, when Stephen appealed based on the fingernail scrapings from the Penny Bernstein attack, you know, the very people who turned down those appeals are the very same people who would be in charge of any appeal. That information goes to the very people who sent Stephen Avery to prison and Brendan Dash to prison, and that's the reality of it. In 1995, when Stephen Avery appealed, because of the fingernail scrapings, they had mountains of evidence there, mountains of evidence that warranted a retrial, and they did. Greg Allen was known in 1985. You know, the things I'm sure people must know by now. Was a known suspect in 1995. Stephen Avery had an alibi, 1985. I'm sorry if you've said 95 a second ago, but I'm not so sure if I did. But Stephen Avery had an alibi from 1985. Greg Allen was known in 1985. In 1995, Brown County Correctional Officer phoned Montewark Correctionals and said they'd got a man in there who, they believe innocent. So they knew in 95 of Gregory Allen, plus everything Stephen Avery had with his alibi, testimony, and they rejected his appeals. The very people who had all that evidence, all that knowledge, all that information, rejected the appeals alongside the fingernail scrapings that exempt Stephen from that crime. No further investigations were done to rule anybody else out, but there wasn't Stephen Avery's fingernail scrapings, it wasn't his DNA. So it placed somebody else at the scene other than Stephen Avery, but no further investigations was ruled out. Now, in a logical, situation, evidence, independent court, independent judge, that would warrant a retrial, and it would have done, but it wasn't, and that's where the appeal went in 95, and it did. So the very people who rejected his appeals in 1995 are the very same people who have rejected it since. So when this talks about the bar for reopen the Avery case is high, she says, as Avery has exhausted all his appeals, it doesn't make one bit of sense at all. And is this the world we're living in? Because it does not make one bit of sense. The very same people in charge of any appeal are the very same people who was in charge of the 1995 appeal, who rejected the appeal in 95 when they had mountains and mountains of evidence. So the appeals that he actually has are pointless, completely irrelevant to it being taken seriously, or even warranting any retrial. So no matter how many appeals he has, the result, the conclusion will be the same. Rejected, 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 rejected. And these are people who have exhausted Stephen Avery's appeals. The people who have exhausted all his appeals are the same people who had all the evidence in 1995, Gregory Allen, his alibi, fingernail scrapings, no further investigations. The very same people who have exhausted his appeals are the very people, who sent Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey to prison. And that is the reality of it. That is the reality of it. And, I find it very hard to understand. There's enough evidence from the 2007 trial. There's enough evidence in this case to warrant a retrial right now. Right now, there's enough there to warrant a retrial right now. What evidence? The evidence is right there. The evidence to release Stephen and Brendan is right there. And what we're talking here, 4, 5, 6 months. What I think, right, and I've got a very, when I hear something, I logically think me. And what I'm hearing is kind of delay. That's it. Delay. That's all it is, right? Is delay. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing something of a 4-month period, something will happen. 5-month period, something will happen. 6-month period, something will happen. And it's going to be a prolonged spinning it out. People might lose interest. And that could be the feel of this. People might, it might not have that support. And maybe that's what they want in a way. Maybe they want that. Maybe they want people to forget about it. Maybe that's a hope. Maybe that's a hope that this fizzles out, making emergencies to some people were a passing trend and the rest of it. Popularity, what people call, entertainment's died down. Maybe that's what it is. There's enough evidence there to warrant a retrial right now, purely based on Bob and Scott testimony, purely based on Ken Kratz allowing a testimony that was not a truthful testimony. Bobby Dassey's testimony was a lie, allowed in court by Ken Kratz, a state prosecutor in a murder case. A testimony was allowed in court which should never have been allowed in court, should never have been presented to a jury, ever. That is enough there for a retrial, plus everything else. Do you know what a conspiracy theory is? A conspiracy theory is when people are in charge of the investigation and they're in charge, or whether that gets investigated or not. So they're in charge of the investigation because they're the ones covering it up. They decide what gets investigated or not. And when it doesn't get investigated, it then becomes a conspiracy theory. So what conspiracy theory means is people who are in charge of an investigation will then cover it up. And there's no court, there's no evidence because they're the ones in charge of finding that evidence, independent from the people in charge of the investigation. Then it's a crime, then it's trial. But when it's people, who are in charge of the police, in charge of the courts, who are in charge of the judicial system, the politicians and the rest of it, police commissioners, all them type of people, when they're in charge of it and they get to decide, what gets uncovered and what doesn't, then it becomes a conspiracy theory, and that's what it means. I'm investigating this, but I don't want this uncovered, so now we'll call it conspiracy theory. You know how much sense that makes? You know what kind of a world we live in? That these organisations just do what they like, and then when they don't investigate it to a point of of not doing what they would do separate to investigate themselves, it then becomes a conspiracy theory. Unbelievable, unbelievable. This does not need. This doesn't need evidence. It doesn't need new evidence. It doesn't need theories. They know who done it. They know. They've got the evidence right there. It's right there. Kathleen Zollner has got all the information there to surely get a retrial. Now, what's she stalling for? Why? Is this going to be another 6 months? And then what? Something else happens. What, an article or something, or something gets said, and then another 6 months. Then another 6 months, and then what? What evidence could there be, to warrant a retrial? Or be able to put forward where they would look at it and say, yeah, what? What evidence could there possibly be to set Stephen Avery free when he hasn't done it? It's right there. The evidence is right there. What more do they need? Anyway, I think I'll leave it there. I just wanted to share my thoughts on this utter nonsense. Exhausted all his appeals, and these are the people in charge. Of admit something to court. These are the people who are in charge of retrials, and they're the very same people who sent Stevens to prison in 1985, 2007, and the very same people in 1995 who let Stephen languish in prison for a further 8 years. The very same people who have exhausted his appeals. The very same people who have exhausted his appeals let Stephen Avery lie in prison for a further 8 years when they had information on Gregory Allen, they had the information from Brown County, they had the DNA fingernail scrapings that exempt Stephen Avery from the Penny Bernstein attack. They're the very same people who are in charge of any warrant, any retrial. Now, does that make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me. What I'm seeing now, I'm seeing a delay. I'm seeing kind of a slow type of giving people information, thinking something's going on. Now, I'm a realist. I'm not a pessimistic person, I'm a realist. I'm a realistic person, optimistic but realist. And sometimes, I will not be blinded by false hope. So I'm sharing my thoughts because what I'm seeing is a delay. I'm seeing kind of giving people a bit of something, and then time passes. Another 4 months, what were you going to hear? Oh, we found more evidence. And then another 4 months, another 5 months. Release Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey and bring justice for Teresa Halbach. And peace for everyone.